Hi everyone, it's Christian here. Um, Visiting this little corner of the internet for the first time. So how did I get here? Probably the same way that most people have. Jordan Peterson, Paul Vanderklay, Jonathan Peugeot, to name some of the heavy hitters. What the way that I see this little corner of the internet is the digital church of St. Peterson the First. It was a, church plant founded on the meaning crisis, deconstruction, new atheism, what is truth, kind of meta. Those are kind of the meta issues that I think bring people to this area. So you kind of have this Jordan Peterson is the patron saint. Paul Vanderklay is the priest of the parish of YouTube. Jonathan Peugeot is like a prophet. John the Baptist-ish. Finding meaning and symbols and images, and somebody like John Vervaeke is like a monk out, like Mendelssohn or somebody out there doing the science in the monasteries of the university, and YouTube's the cathedral. That's how it seems to frame for me. And who am I? I am a parishioner. One of the gathered flock, one of the observers, one of the seekers. And I think the community being built, something Paul Vanderklay seems to naturally have an aptitude for, which is, gathering a group of people, listening, laughing, empathizing, teaching, synthesizing. I think that's why he was uniquely able to do this. He had an affinity for C.S. Lewis. It's obvious that he was paying very close attention in the aughts to the new atheism, and who knows what he was doing in the 90s when I was a kid. That those things shaped him and prepared him for this kind of space, which is interesting. Today I went back and I kind of saw, I guess, the first estuary that I've seen live on YouTube today, but I kind of heard these words floating around throughout the years. And so I went and looked at some of his first videos about Jordan Peterson, and the title was something like A Pastor Responds To. And I think that's really important because this movement needed a pastor, not just a intellectual and not just a prophet, but a priest to help synthesize these things, help care for the hearts and the minds in a tangible way, in a personal way. You're in this Reformed kind of Protestant, or Paul is in the Reformed Protestant tradition. So how does, and I think there's also that question of that he, in a really, maybe beautiful is the right word, in a really humble way, always, he never leaves Jesus behind in all of this. So, and I think, Peterson, there's the reconverts to Christianity, but what about those that were already Christian? And I encountered Paul pretty early on. I mean, how do I fit in to this? How did it all create meaning for me? 2016, I used to be a pastor at a church, and I'm not anymore. I made a decision that cost me that position, and my life unraveled completely. I was in my early 30s. And so 2016 is Proposition C16 in Canada. Jordan Peterson's on campus. I'm pretty much off all social media except for YouTube. And here's this guy saying some things that are interesting. Trump's, a nominee for president. Uh, it had been kind of, a wild ride. I mean, it was shocking to see that change in the nomination process. And here's, the people being bold in different ways. There's the Trump bold, and then there's the Jordan Peterson bold, and they're different. And, I was actually like a worship pastor. So music and church ministry had been a part of my life for 15 years. And during that time, I spent a lot of time, looking for meaning myself when you're doing this thing, this ministry thing. And I think Paul probably could relate, especially in the early 2000s when the new atheism just kind of exploded onto the scene. I remember I was at this Christian camp and we were in Florida, and we went to Barnes and Noble, and there was this like shrine to the God delusion, these big silver backed books, thinking, man, is this thing that I'm living my whole life, around, circling my whole, is it true? And that was a question, so I was listening to a lot of apologetics, guys like, Tim Keller, but also some of the more traditional apologists like, I'm blanking right now, John Lennox, and who's the other big heavy hitter? You probably all know. What's his name? Anyways, are the arguments sound? Is this thing that I'm devoting my life to true? And while it was a search for truth, I myself wasn't really a person of truth. And I know that may be semantics to some of you, but it was a huge thing for me. But that was where I was, I had this background, and there was this other part of me, my wife's family that I married into. We dated in high school, and I was basically raised like Southern Baptist with some charismatic times early on as a younger kid. And I went to like a Baptist Bible college and got a undergrad in biblical studies and all that. But during that time, I married into my wife's family was Lutheran, conservative Lutheran, like Missouri Synod, but her uncle, her mom's brother, was a bishop that became an archbishop in the Catholic Church, and she had aunts who were nuns in the Catholic Church, and an aunt that had forsaken her nun vows and become Greek Orthodox. And these are the people that I would have Thanksgiving with. As a Baptist kid, I felt like I was like, going to the, like some forbidden space and seeing just, on the other side of this curtain, there's people that are serious about their faith. Very serious, probably more serious than a lot of people I know. And it just, it kind of just kept my mind more open to this more ecumenical view of Christianity and the history of the church. And so that's where, listening to people like Robert Barron and then Jonathan Peugeot was not like this first encounter with that world. It actually, I started having conversations with my wife's uncle, who was the bishop, and back in the mid late 2000s, and I was like, I want to know more about Catholicism, and he actually sent me Robert Barron's DVD series, Catholicism, and I watched some of that, and so my disposition or my heart was kind of, I think, uniquely for a kid from the South, softened and experienced. And on the other end, like my mom's family was very Southern Baptist, people that worked for Lifeway, uh, worked for the Southern Baptist Convention and that kind of thing. So I have these poles. And so this space, I felt more at home listening to these people, bridging these, what was it, bridges of meaning, Paul Vanderklay's thing, these bridging these worlds together as well. But during this time, 2016, like I said, my life kind of fell apart, unraveled, and trying to find out what's left. During that time, I had what I would call some type of a mystical experience where I had to make a decision about being a person of truth. Not just what I believe true, but am I a person who is a truthful person? And I hadn't been. And I had this kind of vision of Abraham. And I was at a crossroads where I was being called to either step into the light, into truth, or to remain in darkness. But it was probably going to cost me even more than I had already lost with my job and my career, possibly my marriage. And I was at that crossroads. And it had to do with, are you going to be a truthful person? And in this moment, I could see a dagger coming down onto Isaac, which was Abraham's full inheritance. Like, okay, lost all this stuff, but don't take my family. At least I'm going to try to control this. But I had to let go of control and let the dagger start to come down. And I opened my eyes and I told the truth. The complete truth, the total truth. And then the rest was in God's hands. And that 4,000-year-old story saved my life. And I just started to just wonder, how did this story that I've known since I was a kid, how did it do that? And that's where all these things start to come together. There were lots of pieces, because there was also the clean up your room, pick up the heaviest load you can. I had to go back to school to start a new career to provide for my family. Like, that was not an easy task. And for somebody that wasn't always bookish, that was a large load to take upon and take some responsibility, gain self-respect, and discovering that there's a difference, that self-respect is not the same thing as pride. And that was all that, 12 steps of, what was Jordan Peterson's book, and so that's mixed in there. And in the middle of that, I stumbled upon Paul, like some of those early responses to Jordan Peterson, and it helped me start to frame these things from a Christian through a pastor's perspective, but also as a kind of a new person. And I kind of skipped the whole deconstruction phase because my faith my world destructed. It didn't deconstruct it. There was destruction. And it was kind of like a death and rebirth, a very kind of quick one. And those questions of, is what I believe true, like completely like melted away. It was now, all of this is true. Was it literal, scientific? I don't care. It's true. There is truth here. This is the truth. And my faith in Jesus was like, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. And I felt like I came to that peace. I came to, not because this stuff was scientifically true, but because of truth, telling the truth, being truthful, being full of truth. And that's where my faith solidified, and it saved me. It saved my marriage. It saved my soul. Um, so is these like the fundamentalist type of perspective on Scripture just kind of like melted away, and what was left was this confidence of the truth of that I believe Jesus is God, but also that He is truth, and this is truth, and truth saved me, and truth, you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And I experienced all that, and I continued to practice being a truth teller, and it was painful, but it was always right. And so I think there's also the aspect of Jordan Peterson bringing this psychological aspect to the Bible that's so powerful, because I myself was psychologically restructuring myself in so many ways, because I was in therapy, trying to understand why I made decisions I had made that had, in many ways, ruined my life. So I didn't need a materialist answer to, of did Jesus walk on water, or was the flood 40 days? And, I didn't, to know that this stuff carried deep meaning and deep truth that was going to transcend all of that. And I think, Peugeot's symbolic meanings, like, and just even that story of Abraham, I'm still wrapping my mind around that more deeper and deeper about meaning, and it's really powerful. So then, there's the 2 years that Jordan was sick and off, and I kind of trailed, into other things, and finished school, started a new career, and, then there was COVID and George Floyd, and it just kind of was ramping up this other aspect of culture, and it was moving away out of like my personal experiences into this cultural happenings. And I remember kind of feeling like, man, where are you, Jordan? I feel like I need your voice right now with all of these things. But he's human. His life, he hit a hard stretch, a hard path. And I think had to ask those questions of himself, what it meant to take responsibility and pick up the heaviest load he could again. So this little corner, this church is growing, and Paul Vanderklay's status is rising. Maybe he's moved into more of like a bishop role, which I'm not even Catholic. I'm just these symbols kind of map. And so it's a church. You can't go to it, so go to church. I think that's always the answer. It's a church you can't go to, so go to church. This little corner. Again, my name's Christian, and I'm going to maybe get more thoughts out there on this, but yeah.